Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. On this week's program, we're going to focus on recruiting. With me in just a moment will be Zach Libby, who does such a great job over at the Wolverine ON3 and the Wolverine magazine. Before he jumps on, a few news and notes to get us going. Sherrone has his staff nailed down, although not everyone has been officially introduced. That will happen in the next week, from what we hear. The main job now is to get the new staff heavily involved with recruiting and making sure attrition via the portal is kept to a minimum this spring. Spring practice will get underway in late March, and the spring game will be on April 20th. So the staff has plenty of time in the next month to settle in. Nothing new from the NCAA recently on the sign-stealing saga. Central Michigan said this week that the NCAA conducted more interviews with them recently and still has nothing to prove Connor Stalions was ever on the sidelines there. Michigan officials say they have not been notified of any new developments in the investigation, so it looks like we just wait and see what they have when the NOA is sent to Michigan, which is expected to be sometime this spring. My guest today says Sherrone and staff are being very aggressive on the recruiting trail. Joining us next is Zach Libby from the Wolverine ON3, who does a great job keeping us updated on who Michigan is going after. So stay with us. Here with us on our game day segment this week is Zach Libby, who covers recruiting for the Wolverine ON3 and the Wolverine magazine. It's great to have you back with us, Zach.
Appreciate it, Mike. Thank you for having me.
So much going on in the recruiting world, in the Michigan football world right now, and we know Sherrone Moore has more than enough to think about and do these days. But recruiting has to be near the top of his list. But the good thing is he has always been considered a top-tier recruiter, though, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has. I mean, just look at his track record as an assistant coach for Michigan, right? Like, recently, this past recruiting cycle for the 24 class, he landed 5 marquee signees on the offensive line, all before the start of the summer of last year, actually. So he was finished up for 24 several months before National Signing Day. So that gave him an early advantage for 25, to start early. But, yeah, I mean, for Coach Moore, I mean, he is, he's very personable, from talking to parents and coaches and, recruiting handlers and even the targets themselves. Sherrone Moore handles himself very well on the recruiting trail. He's a good representative for the University of Michigan. And, there's confidence that he can be that lead ambassador for a program that's coming up a national title. But, yeah, he's gone on record, too, in terms of just how he's going to approach recruiting. And it's going to be super aggressive. And that's a quote. If you're a Michigan fan, that's great to hear. With the expectation that recruiting classes need to finish in the top 10 or higher every cycle. There's a lot of resources and a lot of benefits that a player of high caliber can play for Michigan. In order to close those top 100 guys or those 5-star guys, you need to have a guy like Sherrone Moore at the helm who revels in recruiting and is able to withstand and accept and, I guess, embrace the changes or the evolving world of college recruiting. So, handing the keys to the program was a smart move with Sherrone Moore, but also having him as a leader with recruiting is also a smart move.
And how well the rest of the staff recruits will be key too. But at first glance, Michigan seems to have a group of coaches that love recruiting and evaluating, don't they?
Absolutely. And, you have assistants that are coming back from the national title run. Obviously there's a lot of turnover, but the assistants who are coming back, there's a lot of bright spots and a lot of positives. A lot of younger guys younger than 40. You want to have that energy and enthusiasm when you're making these cross-country trips and, making a commitment to recruiting. You look at a guy like Grant Newsome, the newly promoted offensive line coach. He's 27 years old. After 2 recruiting cycles as tight ends coach, he finishes that tenure, having landed 2 signees in each class, including obviously on 300 tight end Brady Freescorn, who he had a pick of a litter during his recruitment process. Newsome was able to go to Pacific Northwest and land 4-star Hogan Hansen, and then in the 23 class, his first time as a positioning coach, he was able to land guys like Dika Tony Elliott and Zach Marshall. From his perspective as Newsome, he's very, he makes sure that no stone is left unturned. There's examples that you see on the recruiting trail in terms of like Brady Freescorn saying that, Newsome saw multiple of his basketball games while he was uncommitted, making those treks to the Seattle area to see Hansen and his family. He has primary recruiting areas like in New Jersey and Pennsylvania too, so he has his grip on that area, and that region alone is loaded with top end talent that can play at Michigan. You look at another assistant like Kurt Campbell, who was thrown into the fire of sorts, earning his promotion in January of last year, and then immediately he got right to work with recruiting. I mean, his first ever offer that was put on the table for a quarterback was the day after that he got promoted as quarterback coach. He was credited with landing a commitment from Jane Davis, early enrollee quarterback. It took less than 2 weeks for 2025 quarterback commit Carter Smith to announce his commitment after visiting Ann Arbor for the first time in early November. And he's gotten in really well with a number of 2026 and 2027 quarterbacks. It's going to be interesting to see now that Campbell's gotten a new role in terms of offensive coordinator. He's going to oversee the entire offensive recruiting board. So having him at the helm is going to be beneficial for more as well. And then you look at a guy like Ron Bellamy, and wide receivers coach and alumnus of Michigan. He's not afraid to go after the elite of the elite when it comes to wide receivers. A number of wide receivers in the 25 class listed in top 100 nationally by On3 have visited Michigan at least twice. I mean, Talon Taylor out of Chicagoland, Khalid Lockett out of Texas, same with Andrew Marsh out of Texas. These are bona fide 5-star pass playmakers who have a good relationship with Ron Bellamy. This is the cycle for Bellamy too, to land a deep outside threat, like a go-to weapon. So, getting in with these guys is perfect right now. And then with all the new addition hires, guys like Steve Casula, tight ends coach, who immediately worked the phones as soon as his official hire was announced by Michigan. Greg Scruggs, who's expected to have his announcement come soon. He, in his first year of Wisconsin last year, he signed guys like Ernest Wilner out of Baltimore, an elite 4-star pass rusher. And then Brian G. Mary, he's a name that Michigan fans are obviously familiar with because he was a linebackers coach for Michigan during that COVID year. And now he returns after a stint with Tennessee, But at Michigan, he's the one who led the way in landing Junior Colson. And obviously we know how great a career Junior had. So, I think Moore has stockpiled itself with assistants with similar viewpoints and similar attitudes when it comes to recruiting. And I think overall, that's what you need when you're a team like Michigan.
Well, there are some questions about how Wink Martindale will readjust to recruiting. It's been a long absence from college football for him, around 20 years. How much of a concern, if any, is that?
I think you're going to have, based on early reactions from recruits with Michigan offers, guys, that are high-end names, guys who have visited, they're starting to learn the fact that Don Martindale is the innovator of that defense. The defense that Michigan has deployed these past 3 years, which in turn has led to 3 college football playoff appearances and a national title. He is the godfather. So I would say there's no changes in philosophy when it comes to how the defense is run or situated. I feel like with his interview too, and just him getting on staff, he was one that Moore really wanted, and they've hit it off immediately. I feel like a guy like Don Martindale with years of experience as defensive coordinator for the NFL, that plays a big factor in terms of just interest for recruits. And then his ability, I guess, we're going to see how well he can connect with recruits. Because like you said, it's 20 years. But as a closer, having a role like maybe Jesse Minter, who was able to break down X's and O's really well and just be that assistance with the positional coaches and landing top recruits, I feel like Don Mardale has an opportunity to do the same.
Well, we're very early in the cycle for the class of 25. Michigan has 3 commits, and with that very small sample size, they're ranked 4th in the Big Ten, 15th nationally. Do you expect this class will be a bit slow in developing just because of the transition and all of the new faces that are talking to these kids?
Yeah, in a way. Looking at it overall, you expect a team like Michigan, who's coming up a national title, who's coming up a 15-0 run, you would expect momentum to come immediately. And I'm concerning, the January contact period, this February dead period. But obviously, given the transitioning of coaching staff, a new head coach, new coordinators, recruits are, in a wait and see process. Their interest hasn't diminished. They're just waiting and see, getting in with the new positional coaches, building relationships with them, and just seeing how the environment ensues under a new regime. This is why, it's adamant that this spring camp practice period goes as great as it can be for Michigan, because this is the time to bring in these top end recruits, bring their families, get one-on-one time with the positional coaches, let the recruits see how practice is run under the new coaching staff, and let the new coaching staff, I guess, flex his muscles or just set out to prove something, if that makes sense. We're going to see how, having that garner momentum from the spring camp practice will in turn lead to, results during the summer official visits, and then game day visits in the fall, and then ultimately signing day period. So it's a crucial period for Michigan. We're going to see how it turns out, though.
Well, Zach, let's talk about Michigan's recruiting priorities for this class of 25 by position, starting with quarterback. And we already have a verbal from Carter Smith from Fort Myers, Florida, 4 or 5-star kid. I guess it depends what service you look at. Talk about what you like about him and whether Michigan is thinking about adding another quarterback to the class.
Yeah, we'll start off with Carter. I mean, this is a kid who, if he wanted to devote solely to baseball, he would be a top 5 round draft pick in the 2025 MLB draft. He is a pitcher and shortstop, so he has a tremendous arm. And you can see that on the football field, just high velocity, just immense throwing power. He is a superb athlete as well, a true dual threat. He's a threat when he's in the pocket, when he throws out, with his back shoulder, when he throws on the run, when he flexes and runs. I mean, there's a lot of versatility when it comes to Carter's game, and that in turn leads to a high ceiling. Michigan's coaching staff has been enamored with just how the opportunities in which Carter can get developed under, a college strength and conditioning program, as well as a college coaching system. He's drawing comparisons to J.J. McCarthy, especially from On3 scouts. And that alone should intrigue Michigan fans. The throwing mechanics too, obviously, with him being a baseball player, there's going to be some fine tuning in terms of accuracy and just reading progressions and all of that. But again, that comes with development. And right now he has the tools to be that starting quarterback, be an athletic quarterback, be a guy who can make plays by himself, a creator. So overall, we're going to see how well he develops. And once he gets to Michigan, I feel like Michigan fans should be excited for his future. And then, obviously, as you mentioned, the 25, another quarterback. It's interesting. Obviously, Michigan was, all in on Bryce Underwood out of Belleville before he transferred to LSU, the number 1 overall player in the 25 class, residing less than 30 minutes from Ann Arbor. That didn't happen. Right now I feel like Michigan's very satisfied with what they have in Carter Smith. But if Michigan does want to make a 2-quarterback class, I feel like this one would be it. Obviously, Michigan hasn't gotten transfer portal quarterback this offseason. There's still, when looking at the depth chart right now, not a lot of experience outside of maybe Jack Tuttle. But I feel like if they want to make it a two quarterback class, they would focus their efforts primarily on the transfer portal. But right now, I feel like on the recruiting trail, they're very satisfied with what they have in place.
Well, we have no running back commits yet in this class. And yes, we've heard that Mike Hart really hasn't been communicating or out on the trail yet. And that's a story that's been around for a while now. But tell us about some of the kids we have offered, and maybe how many backs you think we'll see Michigan take in this cycle.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would expect Michigan to take at least two. The board is interesting for running backs for 25 just because it's thinner compared to other positions. Outside of a select few names, there's not many to mention, but of the names to mention, they are very, very high profile. And I'm talking about guys like Iverson Howard out of the DMV, who has, gone on record on more than once saying that Michigan is at the top for him. Mike Hart made Iverson Howard a high priority, and this is a kid listed in the On300 by On3. Another one out of the DMV is Bud Coombs. He has not visited, but another guy that Mike Hart has, gotten in early with. But one of my favorites, one that Michigan fans need to start following very closely, is Marquise Davis. He is out of Cleveland Heights, Ohio, the reigning Gatorade Player of the Year for the state of Ohio. He was a few votes shy of winning Mr. Ohio for Mr. Football for the state of Ohio. Jordan Marshall obviously came away with the trophy. This is a kid who goes both ways, but just an elite ball carrier. Ran for over 2,400 yards, over 30 touchdowns. Also starts at linebacker and safety. Former Michigan co-defensive coordinator Steve Clinkscale and Mike Hart were able to build a foundation in terms of relationship with Davis visiting for the Ohio State game. So he's one that I feel like it's a must land in terms of just, his early impact. We talked about Jordan Marshall potentially becoming a day one impact player. Marquise Davis certainly fits that bill as well.
Well, wide receiver seems to be a position we'd like to address by adding maybe 3 or 4 kids this cycle. Hopefully a couple of big-bodied type kids if they're out there. Who are some of the names that we've offered at receiver?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, a ton of top 100 wide receivers have been to Ann Arbor at least twice. There's a few, we'll break it down a little bit more deeper, like Talon Taylor out of Chicagoland. He comes from a 7-on-7 group called Midwest Boom that produced kids like Amarion Stewart, 2024 wide receiver signee, and cornerback signee Josiah Edmonds. So there's familiarity. Obviously, Chicagoland is a place where Michigan has gotten a signee in every cycle since 2019. So, Ron Bellamy is going all in, and Sherrone Moore is the thing as well because that's his area. Talon Taylor is a deep threat, red zone playmaker. He's able to get involved in the run game as well as jet sweeps and end arounds. He's a fun one to watch on film. Another one, Andrew Marsh. I believe he's the number 19 overall player in the country right now for the On3 industry ranking, which, if that ranking stays by this time next year, he's a 5-star. Marsh has been to Michigan multiple times. I've seen him live in a live setting at a camp in the Detroit area, which took place the day after one of his visits. And, this is a kid who just has an elite catch radius. His footwork is great. He's able to get in and out of his breaks really well, sinking hips, just sticky hands, as they like to call it. But he's shown a lot of interest in just, his relationship with Bellamy and being that go-to playmaker for a team like Michigan that, has committed itself to throwing the ball more. And then another one to keep an eye out on is Quincy Porter out of New Jersey. Again, another top 50 wide receiver in the country. He's one that visited twice, most recently for the annual barbecue at the Big House. He doesn't take many visits, so the fact that he's gone twice is a big deal. The fact that he's from New Jersey too, Bellamy's getting assistance with Grant Newsom, the area recruiter, and I think it shows that Michigan is, obviously prides itself on pounding the rock, but having a balanced offense and having that guy where is a go-to weapon. I feel like it would make Michigan's offense just take that next level. And this is the class to do it. And all of the names mentioned, as I mentioned, multiple visits. So they're getting comfortable in Ann Arbor, and that's great.
Well, Zach, Michigan has one commit at tight end in Eli Owens out of Alcoa, Tennessee, in this class of 25. He's considered a high 3-star. We'll probably want to add at least one more tight end, though, won't we?
Yeah, at least one more, and maybe even two possibly, considering that Eli Owens was recruited to Michigan to play that H-back role. So similar to like Mac Preddy. You know, or with tight ends too. Obviously, Newsome switched over to offensive line. Steve Casula, a former analyst from Michigan, you know, he's back into his old spot. But as I mentioned before, you know, Casula got right to work. I mean, of the top names on the tight end board, you know, they've told us, the Wolverine, that they've been in contact with Casula, and overall impressions in the early going are positive. You're looking at guys like Lincoln Sear out of Kansas, you know, a top 50 prospect nationally. You're looking at, you know, Hayden Bradley out of Buford, Georgia, a powerhouse down there. This is one where I feel like Casula is going to show that, you know, if you come to play for Michigan, you're going to be heavily involved in the offense. And, you know, evidence that points to the ascension of Colson Loveland, you know, the impact A.J. Barner had last season, Luke Schoonmaker. I mean, tight ends across the country recognize that if you go to Michigan, you're going to be you're going to have high contribution. And, you know, Colson Loveland comes back as arguably the number one tight end in college football. So that helps a lot too. But, you know, Casula, you know, obviously he has familiarity with Michigan. He has several stops at other schools in the state of Michigan. So he'll have an impact with in-state recruiting as well.
Well, we took 5 offensive linemen in the class of 24, and it's expected we'll look for 3 or 4 more this cycle. And I know the numbers seem low, but Sherrone is looking at some really high-end elite linemen in this class, isn't he?
Absolutely. This is the class for offensive linemen, whether it's tackle or projected interior type. And as you mentioned, you know, Sherrone Moore got a head start with a number of these guys. And having Grant Newsome, I guess, carry the torch now in command. I mean, Newsome was kind of worked his way underneath Sherrone Moore throughout his entire coaching career. So, I mean, general, I guess, what we've been receiving, you know, early intel on what the job that Newsome has done with these offensive linemen, it's, again, positive. Moore and Newsome are kind of targeting, you know, several 4 stars or higher that kind of can contribute to the cause and contribute to the success of, you know, back-to-back Joe Moore awards. You know, certain names to mention, obviously you got to start with in-state Avery Gash out of Birmingham Groves. Gash has been told that he is the number one priority on the offensive line board. He's someone who resides less than 45 minutes away from Ann Arbor. He's been to 3 game day visits. His versatility is something that Newsome has brought up personally to play either guard, tackle, or maybe swing. Gash and his family have been to Michigan for 3 game day visits, along with a total of 5 or 6. So there's a lot of comfort in terms of just coming to a school that's nearby your home, but also celebrates offensive linemen. You know, they're not just seen when they do bad. It's not a thankless job at Michigan. So I feel like that pitch is being reciprocated well. And, you know, there's other targets too. I mean, Jack Lane's a 6'8" offensive tackle from Eureka, Missouri, has Michigan in his top 6 in sets return. Offensive tackle, a top 20 player in the country out of Kansas City, Andrew Babaloa, is set to make his first visit in March. A trio of offensive linemen from Bishop Gorman, all 4 stars are in the top 100, have Michigan offers and have seen Moore and Newsome during the January contact period. 2 of them visited for the Ohio State game, including S.J. Alafatulia, in my opinion, is the best offensive lineman in the class. You know, and then, of course, there's David Sanders, 5-star offensive tackle from Providence Day in Charlotte, former teammate of Jane Davis and Shannon Goodwin, the number 2 overall player in the country. And then there's just a litany of East Coast offensive linemen from New York and New Jersey and Pennsylvania, like Michael Carroll, an on-300 player, Rowan Burns, an on-300 player. All of them have visited multiple times. So, again, you know, offensive linemen want to go to a school where they can get developed, and what better pitch than having 7 offensive linemen potentially drafted in this upcoming April. I mean, there's a lot to like about Michigan when it concerns offensive line.
Well, moving over to the defensive side and the D line, we have one commit, Bobby Kanka from Howell, Michigan. We need at least three in this class, and if you're a D lineman, you got to think Michigan is at the top of the list for some of the high end talent. And there are some of those kids out there, aren't there, Zach?
Yeah, for sure. Look at the national championship, right? Just rewind that game and watch the dominance that Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant had. Quite frankly, all 15 games that those two produced. I mean, they're bona fide first-round draft picks in 25. So if you want to come to Michigan, you're going to get that sort of development. You know, it's interesting with that position. Obviously, Mike Elston, former defensive line coach, you know, he was terrific on the trail in terms of just sharing family values and being a family man, and that just wowed recruits and their families. He's gone now. It's unfortunate. I feel like there's a how this new hire and Greg Scruggs, former Wisconsin defensive line coach, performs. But, you know, Scruggs he's an NFL player. He was an NFL player himself. It wasn't too long ago where he was in the shoes of these recruits. And, you know, he's been on record on interviews before and just stating how much of a passion he has in recruiting. And there's a lot of mutual targets between Michigan and Wisconsin that Scruggs formerly offered during his tenure there. And we spoke to a number of them that have Michigan offers as well in the defensive line. And they said, you know, one recruit mentioned that Scruggs is certified. You know, he's an elite recruiter. One number of them have said they've started to gain a relationship and hope to have that continue while he's at Michigan. So, you know, Scruggs too has Ohio connections. He was born and raised in Cincinnati. So having a guy there with multiple connections and a hotbed that Michigan loves to recruit in is going to be beneficial as well. So we're going to see the type of job that Scruggs can do, but based on what we've gathered before a hire is announced, it's been good so far, and you know, it's going to be exciting to watch.
We don't have an edge commit in this class yet, and we'd like to add two, maybe three, but it's not a particularly strong year for edge talent, is it, Zach?
Not compared to other cycles, but you know, that's another position, you know, that was affected by the loss of a coach, Dylan Roney, who was a graduate assistant. He worked exclusively with the edge rushers, and, you know, he was regarded as a great teacher, a great, you know, mentor, and just someone, you know, it felt like he was like a big brother to players and recruits. You know, even though he was a grad assistant, he was able to get on the road and do in-homes and meet with targets at their schools and all that good stuff. So I feel like now with Scruggs in the picture, he's going to have command of the edge recruiting board as well. And again, you're going to have another young guy with an enthusiasm recruiting. So we're going to see what he can do at both defensive line and edge.
Well, linebacker is another group where we need at least three commits, and this is considered a very good year at that position, isn't it, Zach?
Yeah, there's a bunch of top 100 linebackers. There are two right now that I am very high on. The first one is Noah McHale out of California. Just a violent, physical, downhill linebacker. He gets sideline to sideline. He fits that mold of what Michigan wants in a linebacker, especially in that front seven. You know, you have to be able to run sideline to sideline and be an asset in pass coverage in Michigan's defense. And Noah McHale is one that I really like. Another one that On3 is high on is Kamar Archie. Out of the Hunt School in Princeton, New Jersey, he is a former teammate of Owen Wakefield, defensive line signing in 24. And, you know, Archie visited Michigan for the first time at the beginning of February, at the end of the contact period. So he was able to get in with area recruiter Grant Newsom, and they're building a relationship. But that position's interesting. You know, most of these offers at linebacker, if not all, came from Chris Partridge. And as we know, he was released in mid-November before that Maryland game. So Michigan has gone a few months without a linebackers coach until, you know, the expected hire of Brian G. Mary from Tennessee. And, you know, we've spoken to some linebacker targets who have a relationship with G. Mary. And, you know, Tennessee, you know, to their credit, they recruit very well. And they're not afraid to go after top talent in the Deep South, compete in the SEC, go up north, go out west. You know, G. Mary has gotten the stamp of approval in terms of just his return to Michigan. And, you know, for example, linebacker signee Mason Curtis was one of them. You know, he had a relationship with G. Mary before he committed to Michigan. So That was a good one, just to keep, have a guy with, as I mentioned, ties to the Deep South and has a prior relationship with Moore as well, because, they both coached together at Louisville a decade ago. So we're going to see what G. Mary can do. But based on his past results at Michigan, he landed Junior Colson. So we'll see what else he can do.
In the secondary, we're looking for 4, maybe even 5 kids. And that's a lot of bodies. But this year's secondary class is considered to be special, isn't it, Zach?
There's too many to name to have that special, category placed on them. This was the year that you felt like Michigan could get that 5-star, that top 100 cornerback. Seeing live production of what guys like Will Johnson, Mike Sanderstill, Josh Wallace, McCarty Page, Ron Moore, those guys played such a huge role in Michigan winning 15 straight games, and having a positional coach like Steve Clinkscale, who's one of my favorite coaches to follow on the recruiting trail, just based on how he's able to connect with targets and their families on a personal level. His loss obviously stung. He was in for a lot of just early guys you think could play early. I mean, DJ Pickett, a 5-star, the number 6 overall player in the country out of Zephyr Hills, Florida. He's been to Michigan several times and has connections at Michigan, with his mother attending university and having family in the Metro Detroit area. I mean, Chris Ewald, his decommitment stung, a top 100 cornerback out of Hollywood, Florida, and South Florida. The loss of Clinkscale certainly played a role in that, or just the turnover in general. There's others in Ohio, like Trey McNutt, a top 100 kid, Dwayne Galloway out of Columbus, a top 100 kid. It's going to be interesting to see how quickly Lamar Morgan, former defensive coordinator at Louisiana Lafayette, can do in terms of picking up the pieces. He has a big job, an important job ahead of him in Michigan to help Michigan get back in tight with these defensive backs. Not much intel on Morgan, considering, he comes from the group of 5 level. But based on research, as defensive coordinator for Louisiana Lafayette, he helped the Raging Cajuns sign 18 defensive signees in the 23 and 24 class, all from Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, and Alabama. Lamar Morgan is, played at college in Louisiana, so obviously a lot of Deep South ties. But before he was at Louisiana Lafayette, he spent a year as cornerbacks coach at Vanderbilt, and that was where he and Jesse Minter were on the staff together. And they, in turn, signed, I think, 7 or 8 defensive backs, including 4 4-stars. And, obviously it's Vanderbilt. It's a tough place to recruit. So that's huge. Especially with the fact that, the hiring of Morgan came from the recommendation of Minter. So it's a guy that Minter knows can make an impact in Michigan. But we're going to see what kinds of contributions he can make on the recruiting trail, Morgan's sake, starting spring camp.
Well, as always, we could talk for hours about recruiting, and we're going to have plenty of time to do that in the coming months before the season starts, and we'll get Zach back on to do just that several times, I hope. Final question today before we let you get away, though, Zach. It's so early in the Sherrone Moore era, but right now, you're around this all the time. Do you feel optimistic about what Sherrone and his energy brings to Michigan on the recruiting scene?
I am optimistic. It's hard not. He has a commanding presence that has an effect on people, and I feel like that will benefit Michigan. But there's only so much that he can control, and what I mean is, if you pair Moore with his commitment to recruiting with a sustainable and a competitive NIL initiative, that will get Michigan over the hump and get them to new levels. We can sit here and talk about NIL for days too, but overall, Michigan needs to step up with investment into its football program with NIL, whether it's transfer portal or recruiting. It needs to want to be competitive in that realm. Otherwise, Michigan will be prone to losing out on kids and prospects and elite targets who command high market value. And those are the players that should be expected to play at Michigan. So overall, we're going to see what else Michigan has up its sleeve in supporting more in his recruiting efforts by whether or not NIL becomes more of a embracement by university leaders or not. So we'll see about that.
Well, and add on to that last question then, Zach, one of the exciting hires this offseason, to me anyway, has been that of Sean McGee as Associate AD and GM for football. It's a new position, but will Sean's job impact recruiting and even NIL in any way?
Yeah, I mean, he's the general manager, so-called general manager, and, you're seeing that trend lately with blue bloods and powerhouses. Having a guy like that who's so focused is, the off-the-field stuff, NIL, recruiting, overseeing everything. I mean, this is a guy who comes from the Chicago Bears, has plenty of experience in terms of just both at the collegiate and NFL level. So I'm excited to have, it's exciting to have a guy like him with his repertoire and just, having goals and ambitions in mind for the betterment of the program. I feel like that's a fantastic hire for Michigan, especially off the field.
Well, it is such an eventful transition and recruiting period for Michigan, and it's been great to have Zach Libby with us today, who covers recruiting for the Wolverine ON3 and the Wolverine magazine. Zach, we thank you for your time, and as I said a moment ago, we will surely have you back a couple of times in the coming months to update us, so we look forward to that visit.
Thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate you having me.
On Quick Hits today, Michigan's miserable season continues on the hardwood. Juwan Howard's team dropped another one Thursday night. This time they fell to Northwestern on the road, 76-62. Michigan will return to the Chrysler Center for a matchup against number 3 Purdue on Sunday. Tip-off is scheduled for 2 p.m., and the game will be broadcast live on CBS. The women lost to the Spartans last weekend at home and will be on the road in Evanston to face Northwestern on Saturday. In this rebuilding season, the ladies are 16-11 overall, 7-8 in Big Ten play. Hockey hosts Notre Dame on Friday and Saturday for the final 2 regular season home games of the year. Puck drops at 8 p.m. on Friday and 6:30 p.m. on Saturday, with both games airing on the Big Ten Network. Saturday marks Senior Day as the program honors its seniors at the conclusion of the game. They are 15-12-3 overall, 8-10-2 in Big Ten action heading into this weekend. Softball will kick off its annual spring break trip with a 5-game appearance at the UC Santa Barbara tournament Friday through Sunday. Michigan opens play against Northern Colorado and Sacramento State on Friday, faces those same 2 teams again on Saturday, and wraps up against UC Santa Barbara on Sunday. They are 6-3 heading into the 3rd week of play. Baseball takes their 2-2 record to Arlington, Texas for 3 games in the Kubota College Baseball Series, Friday through Sunday. U of M will open the weekend with Oklahoma State on Friday, followed by a contest against number 7 Oregon State on Saturday. The weekend concludes with a matchup against number 2 Arkansas on Sunday. All 3 games will be streamed live on Flow Sports. That does it for another week. Make sure you tell your Wolverine family and friends about the show and join us again next week. And I would appreciate you leaving a rating or comment about the show wherever you get your podcasts from. Thank you in advance. It means a lot. Have a great Wolverine weekend, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!